Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with corned beef and kimchi fried rice. That's right, besides beef Wellington, I'd say kimchi fried rice is probably the most popular food wish I get. Which I guess makes sense since for a while it was an extremely trendy recipe. Which is kind of amusing because a dish like fried rice, to me, is like the opposite of trendy. Okay, for me this is just one of those comforting, homey, go-to meals you make on a weeknight when you can't figure out what else to eat. But nevertheless, I'm very excited to show you my take on this. And we'll start with the MVP of this recipe, and that's the kimchi. And when we pour that from the jar or container it came in, we'll want to do that over some kind of strainer, because besides the kimchi, we're also going to want to use some of this kimchi juice that comes packed with it. And hopefully we'll end up with about a quarter cup of that stuff. But if it's a little less, no problem. We'll just use whatever we get. And what we'll do is let that finish draining while we head to the stove to review the next couple ingredients, which would be a couple tablespoons of vegetable oil, or in my case olive oil, which I think works nicely. And then if we are going to use meat, we'll go ahead and toss that in. And what you see here is some diced up corned beef, which was left over from a certain fabulous video we did recently. So we'll go ahead and add that to our oiled pan, which by the way is cold. All right, don't turn on the heat yet. Let's just leave that as is, while we head back to what is hopefully our now drained kimchi. And we'll transfer that to our cutting board and whack that up as small as we want. All right, some people like big chunks, some people like tiny chunks. And since I have no way of knowing how big you want your chunks, we'll just go ahead and leave that up to you. But I do like to chop mine up fairly small. And then once that's set, we will add that to our pan and finally turn on the heat, which I'll set to medium-high. And what we'll do is cook this stirring for, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 minutes. That's going to sort of depend on exactly what you're into. All right, so you can do this anywhere from where it just warms through all the way until it's like well browned and caramelized. And for the record, I've done it both ways, and both are great. So sometimes it just comes down to simply how hungry you are. And by the way, if you're not into corned beef, go ahead and use something else. I mean, you are, after all, the Heidi Fleiss of your kimchi fried rice. So if you'd rather add ham like a madame, or some other meat, feel free. Or don't put any meat and have it vegetarian style, which is how it's supposed to be in the first place. But having said that, the corned beef was amazing. It comes highly recommended. So we'll go ahead and cook that for as long as we want. And then what we'll do once we think that's set is go ahead and add our cooked rice, which for me is almost always the cold leftover stuff. But if you want, you can certainly cook it fresh. And we'll go ahead and add like 3 generous cups. And then besides our rice at this point, we will also add our kimchi juice, which I would consider sort of the secret ingredient here. It's just so intensely flavorful, and the complete opposite of the next ingredient, which is a splash of water. And then we'll also at this stage put in a couple spoons of Korean chili paste, which is called gochujang, or as I prefer to pronounce it, gochujang. And if that looked kind of sticky and hard to get off the spoon, it was, since it's basically a paste made from hot chili powder and rice flour. But this stuff is amazing, and one of the keys to this dish, and not that hard to find in the stores these days. But anyway, we'll go ahead and mix all that together, at which point we'll sort of even it out, and then we're going to let that cook still on medium-high for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then we'll go ahead and give it another mix. And what's going to happen is the grains of rice at the bottom that are getting all nice and browned and crusty are going to be mixed back in, and a whole bunch of new grains of rice are going to be on the bottom getting crusty. And that is basically the method we're going to follow until we think it's done. And after each stirring and patting down, I'll let it go for a few minutes longer than the last time, so as to ensure a very thorough crustification. Okay, right here you can hopefully see what I'm talking about. Okay, that rice that was pressed against the bottom of the pan is getting beautifully browned. And basically we're going to keep doing that until this has the exact texture we want. Meaning the ratio between that softer, stickier rice and that brown, crispy, crustified rice. So generally I like to let this crust over about 3 or 4 times. And by the way, I highly recommend a nonstick pan here. I know, all the wok people just rolled their eyes. But anyway, I think by using a nonstick, we help ensure that all that crispy crustiness is happening on the rice and not on the pan. So like I said, I repeated that 3 or 4 times until I decided it was plenty crusty enough. And also I was really hungry. And what we'll do when we do reach that point is turn off the heat and add our last few ingredients, which will include a handful of sliced green onions, as well as some lightly toasted sesame seeds. I know they don't look toasted, but they were. And then last but not least, a nice drizzling of sesame oil, which as you can see I'm measuring very carefully. But all kidding aside, be careful with that, because it is a fairly strong flavor and you can overpower everything else. And we will go ahead and mix all that in. And it's possible we may be done. But we don't know because we haven't tasted yet. Right? Depending on how much salt was in your meat and in your kimchi, you may or may not have to add some here. So we'll give it a taste. And mine definitely needed a little bit of salt. But instead of actual salt, I'm going to put in a little bit of soy sauce. Although either would work, or a combination. And that's it. Once that's stirred in, and we are absolutely thrilled with how this tastes, we'll go ahead and serve that up. And please believe me when I tell you this would be absolutely fantastic eaten like this. But what would be even more so would be if we top this with an egg, either fried or poached. And I do prefer poached, since I think it's a better contrast with those bits of crusty rice. And then what we'll do is garnish that with some Korean chili flakes, or something similar. And then for a final touch, we're supposed to top this with some finely sliced seaweed. But I didn't have any seaweed. So I went with some thinly sliced landweed. No, not that landweed. I sliced up some nasturtium leaves that grow wild in my garden, which have a beautiful, subtle sort of watercress-like flavor. And I figured they sort of serve the same purpose here. Plus, I get to use the term landweed. #landweed. But anyway, that's it. My version of kimchi fried rice with corned beef is done. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a spoon and bust that egg right in the yolk. And we'll go ahead and dig in and get a taste to see how we did. And you know what? We did real good. I mean, to say this stuff is savory is like the understatement of the year. It is just so deeply and profoundly flavorful, it's hard to describe. And I'm not sure exactly what it is scientifically, but there's just something about cooking and caramelizing fermented foods that produces flavors you just don't get any other way. I mean, I almost said it doesn't need the corned beef, but then I caught myself. Because things always need the corned beef. But the point is, if you didn't put it, it would still be amazingly delicious. Oh, and in case you're wondering how the landweed worked out, very, very nicely. But having said that, if you can, try with the seaweed sometime, since that is also very, very good. But anyway, that's it. Corned beef and kimchi fried rice. Whether you're trying to use up some St. Patrick's Day leftovers, or some leftover rice from a takeout order, or both. I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.